What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to a brand new review, and this time first impressions for the first two episodes of The Acolyte. Now, if you couldn't tell already, guys, I'm actually quite a big Star Wars fan. I've covered Book of Boba Fett to all the Mandalorian seasons, even a little bit of Andor. You know I don't cover a bunch of Star Wars on the channel, so I wouldn't be surprised if not too many people turn up to this video, but I wanted to get my thoughts out there anyway, and especially, I'd love and encourage you guys to let me know your thoughts on these first two episodes, because I've got quite a bit to say. This is going to be a bit more of like an overall review. We might get some specific bits, of course, especially behind the mystery of this show with the Master, or should I say the Stranger, I think he was called on the subtitles. But The Acolyte's an interesting one within that of the Disney Star Wars era, right? Because we've now got to a point in where when there was marketing for the Acolyte show, from the first trailer to whatever else came out, sure, you could find a compliment here and there of like, oh, okay, the combat looks pretty cool and whatnot, but mostly there was a lot of low expectations. A lot of, I would say, this Star Wars stigma has developed to the point of not really having hope for new shows, to the point of where I would say rightfully so to the majority of people's opinions, because I do kind of stand by the whole idea of how Disney have somewhat made their own bed with fans' expectations. Let's not pretend like certain Star Wars projects under Disney haven't been really that successful. So what I'm trying to say is, do people really hold out much hope for a new Star Wars show set in the High Republic? Not really. But long story short here, what do I think of the first two episodes? I actually quite enjoyed it, and I really do mean that. From, I would say, the story, of course, to the set and production and costume design, and definitely the music. The music really stood out to me. I think the way that this was shot was pretty nice. Like, I didn't really have any issues with the cinematography. I didn't feel like there was a bunch of shaky cam to kind of compensate for, multiple different shots of fight scenes. And in fact, the fight scenes were pretty damn awesome. The kind of martial arts that you see of dodging and just this swiftness to it, not really breaking a sweat, to then a little bit later in the fight, Indara's kind of like, oh damn, it really was pulled off quite well, and it was quite refreshing to see, and I think reflective of Jedi in the High Republic period, and where, as the somewhat, I guess you could say, opening teaser said, the Jedi Order and Galactic Republic have been prospering for centuries without war. It is a time of peace, and yes, it is 100 years before the rise of the Empire, which, I guess leads to bigger questions about the repercussions of this series, which doing such a seemingly kind of big canonical thing with the Sith risking revealing themselves, that you need to nail down pretty damn carefully, otherwise you will very much so alienate fans. And I would say rightfully so, no matter kind of how well you may have done with the series in isolation. If it kind of disturbs something, or even if it's kind of hard to believe, or if you haven't written it with every consideration taken into account, then that does most certainly deserve criticism. Now, as for the plot of this show, so far, I wouldn't say it's done anything like crazy, but I do think the core mystery, underlying the show, that is obviously going to continue for the duration of the series, is going to kind of help build out the interest that is nicely complemented by the story to something that just keeps people coming back. Because the story in of itself is like fine, I would say, for the first couple of episodes. Mystery shows are enticing, and I'm not saying that the story outside the mystery isn't enticing, but what I do want to point out is that the intrigue and fascination and dying to learn more each and every week can often make the story seem better than what it is, because you really have fans guessing at what's going to happen each week. Okay, is this really Darth Plagueis' apprentice, or is it the guy above Plagueis, or is this something else? Does this really add up with that? Or but is there this thing going on with Osha and Mae, or something else? What was the thing that happened that night when Osha's family's home and village burned up in flames? Why did that Jedi Master drink the poison and take his own life? Like, what was the thing that he did back then that he felt what they were doing was right? Like, there's this kind of intrigue where, again, it fascinates people, and I hope that the storytelling and the writing going alongside this is just as decent. Sure, it might waver here and there, but to give more credit to just the mystery, I was also surprised with how taken I was with the characters in just these first 2 episodes. And that's not to say that I'm absolutely in love with all of them, but to get sold on a new show with an entirely brand new set of characters is quite hard to do. So obviously we have Lee Jung-jae as Sol, Master Sol, and what I wrote down on my notes here is that, him and Qui-Gon would be good friends. And I think the similarities there are somewhat how Qui-Gon, I would say, his true allegiance was to the Force, the light, rather than that of the Jedi. Now, that's not to say that he wanted to betray the Jedi or do anything like that, but I see that similarity in Sol with regards to, Qui-Gon was quite bullheaded because he really did feel like his calling or what he found was the right thing to do. Now, Sol here, you can see as somewhat little resistance to that of what the Jedi might be doing or what Jedi Master Venestra is asking of him. And he ultimately concedes and he's like, right, okay, we'll go with that plan. But you can see him being like, oh, no, but I think I should be doing this. He wants to go with his gut too, just like how Qui-Gon's gut was always leading him, or the Force was leading him. I don't know. I could talk about Master Sol all day, but I think Lee Jung-jae gives a very good performance as well. His lines, every word spoken does feel quite deliberate. There's something behind it. It's not just like bland, and I do feel like there's a couple of bland moments here or there from characters, but I do feel like that's just gonna, I'm gonna give them more of a chance to flesh out a bit more because, obviously when you have Master Sol come in with Jecki, played by Daphne Keane, who was X-23, I do feel like you need to give the characters a bit of a chance to shine and grow a little bit. And having said that, I did enjoy how Jecki really kind of does outshine Jedi Knight. Was it Yord? Now, Yord is just this tryhard, obviously meant to be this kind of comedic-esque, Jedi who they play it on a fine line because he's deadly seriously trying to, be the best that he can be for the Order. And I appreciate that they don't step over the line, because if they kind of went too comedic with it, I would facepalm. I'd be like, why are you just making this Jedi to be a bumbling idiot? He's not, but the way he asserts himself with his actions, he's a bit of a tryhard. He's ironing his freaking Jedi robe. You do have Jedi Master Venestra, and she kind of reminds me of like, I don't know if, again, she's like the Grand Master, or she kind of reminds me of a bit of a Mon Mothma figure. She's the one kind of pulling the strings from the Jedi Temple. And then there's obviously Osha and Mae, the I would say biggest characters of the story, at least so far. They are twins. The basis of the story is pretty interesting, again, bolstered very much so by this mystery. I hope it pays off in good ways. That's a big risk as well that I should have mentioned. With mysteries like this, there's a lot of intrigue, and so with that carries a bit of risk, because what if it just turns out to be like, oh, okay. And even worse, what if that doesn't really make sense? But so far, with Osha and Mae's origin, it's something I am looking forward to learning a bit more about, because I think it's a good basis for the series. It makes sense that they wanted to drop the first 2 episodes, because you learn that Mae is the twin sister of Osha. And when they were kids, 16 years ago, you had Master Sol and 3 other Jedi stationed on Brendok. One of them being Master Endara, played by Carrie-Anne Mos, absolutely amazing. Master Torbin, who I just like to call the chilling guy. And then Kel Naka, the Wookiee, of which we got the teaser in for the last scene of episode 2. And something happened where we just know that a fire happened and everyone perished in the village, and apparently Mae started that fire, and Master Sol could only save one, which was Osha. She then got trained to be a Jedi, of which the Council were a bit, sticky on, reminiscent of Anakin. She's quite older than youngling age. She was also in grief, which is an attachment, so she was always a bit of a sketchy student to even bring into the Order, but lo and behold, they allowed her to be. But she left the Order 6 years ago, and we still don't have a full picture as to why, other than a lesson that Master Sol tried to teach her again and again and again and again, is to let go of that attachment, the grief of the past. And I guess she just couldn't quite do that, so she ultimately decided to hang her hat herself, and she left the Order of her own decision, right? So far with what I'm working with there, I'm like, okay, cool. In this initially the story looks like it could be her killing these Jedi, of which, by the way, I was a bit sad to learn that Carrie-Anne Mos's character died, like, 10 minutes into the episode. To be fair, obviously, you know, one thing I shouldn't forget is we will probably see her again in those flashbacks to Brendok 16 years ago with whatever the heck happened that night. Now, there is obviously a lot of things that is giving this resentment to Mae. And there's a few things that I have ideas of with theories. And by the way, I don't know any spoilers. Nothing. No leaks or whatever, so don't worry about that. It's just my own little boba speculation. But with her confronting Torben in episode 2, so another Jedi that she successfully manages to take down with some poison. Actually, he did that of his own will. He was just like, I've been waiting for you, Mae. And it's just like, well, why didn't you come out of the meditative state when she tried to kill you the last time? There's little nitpicks like that, but not that that's a real nitpick, but there's quite a few things. Like, there's another moment, by the way, where we have Osha knowing she's on a cliff edge, and Master Sol's right there, but she proceeds to keep stepping back and fall over the... Like, why? I don't know why. But back on point now, he says, I've been waiting for you, but we thought we were doing the right thing. So I think there's a couple of Jedi who thought they were doing the right thing that night, and I don't even think Master Sol necessarily knows what happened. But maybe he does, because one other interesting clue to this whole situation is that, okay, you know, Mae's family died, but then, you know, if she was the only survivor, why wouldn't you record that she had a twin sister on her record? That was something pointed out by Jackie and Yoda. Like, I didn't know that's not on her record. What are you trying to hide? And I also think it's going to be something that could be open to interpretation, so I'm not saying that Master Torben and Indara to Sol and whatnot did such a diabolical Sith-like crime. It could be something in where they kind of really thought they were doing the right thing, but they knew it was something that is kind of un-Jedi-like. Sometimes there's certain things that they might do if the need arises. Again, what they felt what they were doing was right, according to Master Torben, but it's still haunted him ever since. Now, what is this thing? I actually don't know what it could be. I don't think Mae actually started the fire. I think that's something maybe obvious. I mean, I could be wrong about that. I do want to know how she was trained by this Sith apprentice or Sith master, because I figure that's kind of maybe a little bit convenient. So, okay, my family happens to die. The blame is put on me. Everyone thinks I'm dead. And I just so happen to be trained by the perfect opposition to the Jedi to cultivate my dark side skills and getting revenge. So I hope there's a good logical reason as to how she stumbles across into becoming an acolyte for the Sith. And I like how this also potentially blurs the lines with characters that we're beginning to kind of like. I mean, granted, we didn't get too much time with Master Indara. She kind of died at the beginning. And then we had floaty Jedi chilling guy die as well, Torben. But Master Sol is clearly the Jedi we're going to spend most time with, who was stationed on that planet and where the Jedi crime happened all those years ago, and the very reason for what turned Mae to be the monster she's turning into today, the potential acolyte, right? So I like how we're gonna, go along with this guy who is seemingly Qui-Gon-like, and we like him, and I'm not saying he's gonna turn evil or anything, but maybe he is hiding, and maybe the show itself is hiding how much involvement he had on that moment back then, and maybe how he signed off on it as well. And it kind of makes you look at the Jedi as, good and evil is maybe just a point of view. Now, it might be the case, by the way, that he learns whatever the real truth behind this Jedi crime and what that was himself. Like, what if he stumbles across it and had not much to do with it, if anything, back then, and he thought it went down one way rather than another, and he's going to kind of reflect the audience in that way, and that could be pretty sad. But another thing that I want to talk about, there's a couple of cool theories that I really like out there, but as Mae is making her way back, she sees, I guess, what many people think is the Master, but could be the apprentice. More on that in a second. The Jedi live in a dream they believe everyone shares. If you attack a Jedi with a weapon, you will fail. Steel or laser are no threat to them, but an acolyte kills without a weapon. An acolyte kills the dream. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's a cool way to end the first episode, but it's like, I mean, he said if you attack a Jedi with a weapon, you will fail, but, like, quite literally, we had Mae kill Master Endara with a weapon. Granted that they did make a point of this, which I was glad about, because I was like, did they really just do that ending monologue for it to kind of contradict what the Acolyte was doing in the episode? But when we had Mae visit Camille, who seems to be, I think, another potential Acolyte. Like, there seems to be, whoever is the top dog master, there are people underneath competing for the role of apprentice. And trust me, I'll get into this theory in a second, because I really think this could be perhaps what is happening, and it's going to be exciting to see if that happens. But Camille, even though when he's confronted by Sol later on, pretends he knows a lot less than what he really does, but he must be in a similar position to that of Mae, because they both talk about this familiarity with what has to be done to please the Master. For example, we have Camille start to say something about the Sith Code, and where he says the Jedi justify their galactic dominance in the name of peace, and that's when we have Mae say, is a lie. So Camille, I think either he's an Acolyte who couldn't quite do the... Like, clearly there's a test put out to these Acolytes being like, right, you have to kill a certain amount of Jedi, bonus marks for if you can kill them without a weapon, because that will please me. And maybe he's like a failed Acolyte, but he's still kind of like a squire amongst this little kind of sect of wannabe Sith. But anyway, back to the main thing with this stranger. There's an idea out there, and I think this does make a lot of sense, in how in the Star Wars universe, we know there's a rule of two, and it was created by Darth Bane, and it's maintained with Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader, right? There's always a master, always an apprentice. So the show is called The Acolyte. Now, the thing is, an Acolyte really is kind of a word for if you kind of want to be a candidate to be that of a Sith apprentice. So what I'm trying to say is, that character in the distance, the one that we heard speaking in the monologue, the one in the mask, may just be the Sith apprentice to whomever the Master is. But the idea behind this theory is that he could be the apprentice, right, if you're following me here, of the Sith Master. So the rule of two, there's a master above him, he's the apprentice, but he is seeking his own apprentice through the form of trying out multiple acolytes out there, right? So that when he slays his master, which is the way of things, to become the master, you must kind of take out the master, and then that makes you the master. But usually when doing so, you kind of want to set up your own, you want to have your own insurance of like, oh, I've already got my own apprentice here, ready to take over my position when I ascend to master through taking out my own master, if you're still with me there. Now, I think that obviously begs the question of, if Mae is trying to prove herself to the Sith apprentice, who is the Sith master above them, and will we see that? I don't know about that. I think that could be something, if this theory is true, that is left in kind of the smoke screen. Like, will we actually see the Sith master? Could we see the Sith Master at the very end when this Sith apprentice perhaps takes their own master out? That might be a final scene. Perhaps that would be pretty cool. But I've got a feeling that if this theory does turn out to be true, that it could be a situation of where you mainly just see the Sith apprentice and Mae as the Acolyte take the center stage, rather than the actual dark, current, reigning Darth in the background, because I suppose they're locked up in super, super secrecy. Now, another thing that I want to chuck out there is adaptations don't copy and paste. That's something I say a lot here on the channel. And, Darth Plagueis, when he died, was around about, loosely 100 to 115 years old, right? So what I'm trying to say is, I guess since, this takes place 100 years before the Phantom Menace, and, around about the Phantom Menace is when Darth Plagueis died, you could argue that they could adapt Plagueis being a young apprentice. And what if he's the Sith apprentice wanting to take out Darth Tenebrous? But then I think, even though that could technically work, because, then Plagueis goes on to live as the Sith Master for another 80, 90 plus years after this and dies around the time of the Phantom Menace, where does this leave Palpatine? Does Palpatine just kind of take over whoever becomes the Sith apprentice's position? Because will Mae actually end up being the apprentice and survive the events of this? I don't know. Maybe she dies in the events of this, and the current Sith apprentice has to go on to find Palpatine eventually. I'm really not sure. You see what I mean? This is where it gets a bit confusing with how are they going to adapt things. Do you know what I mean? So let me know your ideas about that, because I could talk about that all day and night. But I am intrigued to learn more about him. I think some stuff will be left a bit bit blurry in the background, but I'm already kind of putting a theory out there that one of the final scenes could be, because no matter what, one of the final scenes probably has to speak to, oh, even though the Jedi feel like they've resolved this case, or it's maybe left as an open case, there's got to be a scene showing how the Sith are still prevailing, and the shadow plan that's taking place over centuries and centuries is still living on. But as things developed overall here into episode 2, I feel like the pacing slowed down a little bit, but I have to admit and I think maybe I could speak for quite a bit of the audience who are enjoying this, still sucked in by the intrigue, the fact that there was dialogue opening up, and how there's another character who's also familiar with him, this master, and pleasing the master and stuff. So I'm like, okay, where's this going? I liked the confrontation between Sol and Mae, although, there's lots of people saying, is it really a Jedi thing to do to kind of go into somebody's mind and steal information like that? I think that was even done in the first episode. Now, there's a bit of a difference that people are arguing about here with regards to a Jedi mind trick is more persuasive, saying, okay, you can go home and rethink your life. And there's like, maybe I'll go home and But there's a difference between going in the brain, Kylo Ren style, and like stealing and extracting stuff. And that's kind of what Sol did. So there are some people nitpicking that. And is it even a nitpick? Actually, I think it could be a legit criticism, because is that something that George Lucas would have done with his Jedi? Actually going in there and mind assaulting, like violating, stealing, the way that he did in the first and second episode, without their consent. Now, I guess you could argue it's kind of like messed up CIA tactics, that when the moment warrants it, it has to be done out of the safety of the possible repercussions of said threat. Maybe that would be their defense. But again, maybe it's deliberate with how this could be how the Jedi are starting to lose their grip on, like, their moral compass of how maybe they think that things like this are acceptable. But I like where things are still going with what it teased us off with in the final moments. We're going to another planet where Canonical is the Wookiee Jedi, and that's going to be probably an interesting fight. And it must be pretty terrifying being an acolyte like Mae. It's like, right, okay, now take out a Wookiee, not only a Wookiee, which would be intimidating in of itself, but a Wookiee Force user. And overall, again, like I could ramble about this all day and all night. Clearly, this video has already been probably too long. But dare I say it, I don't know why it feels like I'm saying something wrong when I say this, but I liked the first 2 episodes of The Acolyte. I really did. Again, when I say that, I do want to just say, like, I don't think it's absolute cinema, but, I want to be honest here on the channel and not just kind of going along with the echo chamber of people being like, oh, Star Wars is rubbish or whatever, oh, so this is going to be rubbish as well. No, like, I enjoyed it. I don't think it was the best written and paced thing at every single scene and corner that we turned around, but I don't think I have to be that pedantic with this one, because overall I think it was entertaining. It gripped me with a bit of the mystery. I do think it's quite risky, so I am still quite apprehensive when it comes to the mystery. I am still left thinking, okay, I still want to know how the Jedi in the prequels weren't really aware of this, and what could the repercussions of how they solve this in this series be. Like, is it going to be a sketchy thing, or are they going to actually wrap it up nicely? It's quite a bold thing to try and do. So overall, guys, those are my first impressions on Star Wars The Acolyte. What are yours? Do you have any theories to contribute down in the comments below with regards to who the Sith person could be? What the Jedi crime was 16 years ago? There's quite a few things to talk about with this show, which is kind of what I like about mystery being laid at the underlying foundations of a plot. It's a bit of an easy pleaser, even if the show turns out to be kind of mid, if that makes sense. So guys, leave a like on this video if you did enjoy it. Would really appreciate you letting me know if you want to see more reviews like this. But I'm gonna love you and leave you now. So just again, appreciate you watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and may the Force be with you always.